And Austin, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Scott.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here. And as a longtime fan of yours and of the Muppet Movie, it's a great opportunity to talk with you about the film. And I understand when you were first offered the role of Max, you originally had turned it down. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think I read that it just didn't seem to have, at least originally, Max involved in the storyline as much as you
Yeah, that's
wanted.
right. He was sort of, throughout the whole script, just a henchman.
Okay.
But not to be fair to the movie. I mean, I loved the script as a whole.
Yeah.
When I read it. I just had a very troubling, disastrous few months in the New York theater scene as an actor. I'd done 3 plays in a row in a new company, and I got really slammed for all 3 of them. So all of a sudden, my acting career in theater here in New York was in serious trouble. And so I was feeling really like, I don't know what to do and all that. And then the movie came along, and I was happy about that. But then when I read the script, I thought, this part doesn't really go anywhere. And so the director called me, Jim Frawley,
Yes.
He called me, and he said, "What's the problem?" And I did not know him at all. I was very touched that he called me.
Sure.
I mean, because I turned it down. And so I told him, I said, he doesn't really go anywhere as a character. And then Jim began to evolve this whole idea that he could change his whole viewpoint about the Muppets as the movie went on and effectively rebel in his own way against the part that Charlie Durning played.
Yeah.
And I knew Charlie because Charlie Durning, 14 years before that, had been in Fiddler on the Roof when we were in the out-of-town tryout of the original production. I was also in that show. And he and I became very good friends on the road, and then they eliminated his role.
Huh.
And then after that, he became quite well known as a film actor and as a theater actor. And he and I had already both been in the front page a few years before the Billy Wilder version, only 3 or 4 years before the Muppet Movie. But he was doing a lot of movies. But I saw in the Muppet Movie that if they developed my part the way that Jim was talking about it, that almost all my scenes would be with Charlie, and I thought that would be such a great reunion.
Oh, you bet.
But I also liked the way that Jim was talking, and I thought it sounded like something that would just add a dimension to the movie. It wouldn't only answer my narcissistic need for a larger part,
Yeah, right.
And I mean, I would have taken it if it had, but one likes to think it would also help the movie as a whole. So I went out and we did it.
Yeah, and I would think that, having worked with Mr. Durning before and had a little bit of a connection there, I assume just, I think you just kind of alluded to it, that it just made the experience even better. You guys were, I know as a fan and as somebody who loves the movie, I can't associate one with the other. You think of Doc Hopper, you also think of Max.
Yeah, and that was partly right there in the new writing that Jim Frawley put in. That sort of began to create that, and then we could take it and run with it, I remember there were a couple of times that we had shoots that were supposed to be late at night of driving around in a car, and we'd be there till 3 or 4 in the morning on I think on the CBS lot. I want to say it was on the CBS lot in the Valley, and we would, we talked all those hours just about our personal lives. It was wonderful.
Awesome.
It was terrific. Then, at the end of the shooting, I was at L.A. Airport, and I about to get on a plane to go back to New York, And I called Charlie, and I thanked him for the whole experience. And he said, "Well, I said, so do you know what you're going to do next?" He said, "Yeah, I'm coming to New York to do the new Alan Pakula movie." And he said, "In fact, there's a part for you in it. You go after that."
Oh, nice.
So I ended up in the Alan Pakula movie with him, too, like almost immediately after all this.
How about that?
So it was a very productive thing all the way around.
Well, yeah, based on everything that was going on, it seemed like it was really good timing, and it kind of set off things in a new direction. And
yeah, and there's that kind of chemistry with another actor is irreplaceable.
Sure, absolutely. I take it when you look back on Max now and the film now, you're happy with everything and how it all turned out.
Yeah.
After that phone call from Jim.
Yeah, right.
Did you have kind of a certain approach to Max, what you personally were going to bring to that character, especially since he makes that kind of turn late in the film?
Once upon part is clear to me. What the through line of a part is clear to me. And it was totally clear in the script. I didn't have to interpret it or anything. It was, after Jim did the rewrite, it was, then I just try to stay open to the director, open to what happens in the scenes as you're playing them. I even do that in the theater, but I certainly do it in the movie. Just stay open, get an overall very broad picture of what the person is, and then just stay open and look at the other people, which, of course, in this case, included the Muppets themselves.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that as a kid, it was really, really cool watching it unfold when Doc Hopper gets a little more sinister. I thought it was great to see Max become that good guy that helps Kermit and his friends when things really go bad. And I always think of like that last scene where, Animal disrupts everything, and one of the last things you see is Max cheering for the whole thing out there in the showdown.
I kept thinking of the part that Marlon Brando played in On the Waterfront. I know that's a pretty far-fetched comparison, but the way that you've seen On the Waterfront, right?
I have not, but I'm very aware. I'm very familiar with it.
Oh yeah, see that movie. It's one of the great movies ever made. And I'm certainly not comparing myself to Marlon Brando, and I'm not comparing the role. But the trajectory that the character Brando plays in On the Waterfront goes through is, at the beginning of the movie, he's totally a stool of the corrupt forces, on the docks.
Yeah.
And then he starts gradually to see the light, and he changes completely, and then he stands up to the corrupt forces. So I thought, okay, I'll just think of it like Brando. I never told anyone.
Oh, okay.
I thought people will think I have delusions of grandeur if I make that comparison. But it's a comparison that just you put in your mind, and it helps you, even though it's not remotely the same thing.
I hear what you're saying. I definitely understand what you mean. The film hits Blu-ray as kind of I think they're calling it the almost 35th anniversary of the film, which is consistent with the humor. So when you look back on being a part of a film, that has such a ginormous fan base and has been there and all the way through these 30 plus years, not every movie has that. And I assume that rewarding for you, especially as an actor, to be not only involved in it, but Max is one of the few characters in those Muppet movies that had a role that was more than just a cameo.
Yeah. And in fact, I was on the movie for 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah, I went out to Hollywood and stayed with a friend, and it was a very happy summer because I just had that really traumatic string of things in New York.
Yeah.
And suddenly to be with all those people and staying with my friend, and also the whole atmosphere of the Muppet movie and of the Muppets and of Jim Henson and Frank Oz. There was something so benevolent about those people and the vibe, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I read at one point in time that, you were talking about the call that you got from Jim, the director, Jim Frawley. It seemed like at times it was a tough challenge for someone like that to come in and take on a role where you've got actors and Muppets that you've got to, make work, whereas Jim and Frank Oz are obviously used to it. This guy had to come in and try it all out, and it was kind of a challenge for him.
Oh, yeah, and he was... do you know what's become of him, by the way?
I don't.
Yeah, I think about him, and I can Google him, but
sure.
He'd made 2 or 3 sort of small films within the Hollywood system, 2, I think, I'm not quite sure, but that had caused a stir, and so he was sort of a hot, youngish director I think the Muppet Movie was his first real kind of mainstream movie, and he had a very original touch, but I think it was hard, and I think after that, either Jim or Frank Oz directed all the other... either Jim Henson or Frank Oz directed all the subsequent Muppet movies. So I'm sure there was a lot of pressure on Jim Frawley. And he was very demanding, very, very demanding. But, that's terrific. He was demanding on the actors.
Yeah. The thing is, this was, the Muppets jumping from TV
from
to
a half-hour
film.
TV show.
Yeah, to film. And, in 1979, they obviously can't do everything they can do today, but the film truly shows just what made Muppet Productions so great, because they pulled off some amazing feats, whether it be Kermit on the bike or Max and Doc chasing each other on the road.
Yeah. Yeah, right, yeah. And I haven't seen the movie in all these years. I saw it twice when it came out. It's so, in a way, I'm sort of glad it was pre-high tech, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it has a kind of an innocence about it.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
As Jim Frawley himself had a kind of innocence about it.
I think it was pretty darn amazing what they pulled off in that film, especially because it all looks real. You know, it's not one of those things where you're looking for the mistakes or how they pulled it off. I mean, you really believing everything that's happening.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know.
You know, unless somebody had been on the Muppet Show or something of that nature, it is a whole new experience working with the Muppets and interacting with them instead of people. I know we've had a couple of other shows where people have had that opportunity and talked about what the experience was like. What was the experience like for you to come on a set and work with the Muppets?
Well, you were working with Frank Oz, really.
Yeah.
or whoever were the voices. He was the voices for a couple of them, or two or three of them. I forget who did what, and I forget who besides Frank Oz. But you were always aware that you were working with the sensibility of the actor you couldn't see, because their inflections were so spontaneous, and they would change it from take to take.
Yeah.
So it was like working with an actor. You were hearing the voice and then looking into the face of the Muppet. But what you were responding to really was the voice right in that moment. So I was acting with Frank Oz, is what it felt like.
Well, that makes sense. Frank had been doing that sort of thing for a long time, so...
Yeah, and he's brilliant at it.
Yeah, he really is. They both
Was
were.
anyone ever any better at that kind of thing than that? Yeah.
What have you thought about how the Muppet legacy and the films have carried on for so many years, and obviously with the new film has a new revived interest, which obviously helps the Blu-ray release of this, because so many new generations are, seeing the new film, but they're going to go back and get to see movies that you were involved in, like this one.
Well, I think that they hit something there with the Muppets, at that time in the mid to late 70s. There hasn't ever been anything like before or since. They hit a kind of edgy sweetness that was, particularly in that decade, the 70s, where everything was so jaded,
Yeah.
that suddenly it was like rain falling, not on the desert exactly, but on land that needed hardy crops in order for the crops to survive. You know? And suddenly people could relax and emotionally relax when they saw the Muppets.
Yeah.
I remember I would have friends much older than I am, maybe the age I am now, and I would call them up, actors I knew, actresses, people, other people, people like in trouble in their lives, people with many problems, and I would call them up and they would say, "Oh, darling, call back," and they would be watching the half-hour TV show of the Muppets. And I was thinking, there's no other TV show that I think they felt, oh, no, they'd say, "Darling, the Muppets are about to come on." And this is before I ever knew I was going to be in a movie with them.
Yeah.
And I was always so struck by how a show like that would reach people who lived alone and who were lonely and troubled in their lives and maybe had some problems, and all that, would look forward to that connection every week. And, of course, it was long before the days when you could buy a whole season of them and watch them all on.
Right.
In a way. So you depended on that every week. And these people would not make any plans for that night.
Well, and you couldn't DVR it either, so if you were going to see it, you had to make time to see it.
Yeah. And these are people, and I'm not talking about kids or even young families.
Sure.
People in their 60s and their 70s, people whose lives had been and were still pretty difficult. It was very touching to me to see how the Muppets reached through a lot of people's defenses. They felt they could emotionally trust the whole occasion. And, of course, the humor didn't hurt that, but just something even beyond the humor. Yeah. And the fact that the humor in the Muppets was never sentimental. The humor was made them like people.
Yeah, well, and it's
humor
very
had
smart.
a real edge to it.
Yeah.
And so the sweetness of the Muppets was never sentimental. They were like eccentric friends you had. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And therefore people who were having rough times in their lives didn't feel manipulated by it.
Yeah.
It was remarkable what they accomplished with those characters.
It really is.
It helped a lot of lonely people.
Yeah, and it had such broad appeal, and it was smart humor too. You know, it was one of those where,
very, yeah.
you know, very, very,
Very
smart,
smart.
sharp humor. It's going to be great to have it available on Blu-ray. I'm looking forward to watching it again. I too haven't seen it in a while, so I'm looking forward to seeing it again. And
Yeah.
I know that aside from the Muppet Movie and the films that you had even more memorable roles in along the way, I know that today you're still in New York and you're still doing involved in some film and stage projects, and I definitely wanted to let people know about that. Can you talk a bit about what you're involved in these days?
Well, the play I'm in is called Choir Boy, and the last performance is tomorrow. It's at the Manhattan Theater Club. They extended it as many times as they could, but now some of the actors are going to take it to another theater out of town in Atlanta, which I'm not free to do, alas, because I would love to.
Yeah.
So we could keep running this for a month.
Wow.
But it has to go. So maybe it'll come back here in New York. So there's that play. It's a new play called Choir Boy, and we've been playing it basically all summer. Then the movie I'm working on at the same time is by Peter Bogdanovich, with whom I made What's Up, Doc, even before I made the Muppet Movie.
Yeah.
And so we're in the middle of shooting that right now. We've been shooting it now for almost a month. It's not unlike What's Up, Doc. It's that kind of thing where highly complicated comic situation among all these people. It's got a wonderful cast.
Awesome. Yeah, like you said, you've got a lot going on. So again, I definitely appreciate you taking time out of all of that to talk with us today. You know, as a fan of yours and a fan of this film, it really was a pleasure. And the Muppet Movie is a very dear film to me, and I want to thank you for joining me today to talk about playing Max.
Oh, thank you, Scott. It was terrific talking.